Oh, Foxy, it's your birthday. Not for real, just for play. This is Cree Summer, and Moana Nui will be right back.
The creator and CEO of Black Lion and Cubs, and we'll have the first question from the audience.
Yes, sir.
How you doing, JB? Of JB versus the World.
You said Jay?
JB.
JB, nice to see you, JB.
Nice to see you too, sir. All right, now, first question. What is your nerdy origin story?
My nerdy origin story. I am from Long Island, New York. And Long Island, back in the 80s, was the place that we as New Yorkers strive to get to. That was like the place of status. That's like the Jeffersons, moving on up. When you were in the city, Queens, Bronx, when you make any kind of money, you want to move out to the suburbs, and Long Island was that place. So my family got the chance to do so. I went to a very diverse high school. I was part of a diverse community, particularly Puerto Ricans, Italians, Jewish kids, so it's a great mix of us there. Asians, just had everybody there. It was a big melting pot for real in Long Island. In any case, my parents were very big on education, and so I excelled in school to the extent that I was put in some of the honors courses. And I remember my nerdy origin story starts at a juncture in high school in particular, where I remember being put in these honors classes, and I looked around and there were no other black people in my classes. And I actually went to my mother and said, Mom, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be here, put me back in the other classes. And of course she never let that happen. But I reflect on that moment often, because it's just interesting how, human beings will dumb themselves down, just to fit in with the masses of people. And I was one of those people that, if I didn't have parents that would advocate for me the way my mother in particular did, I would have allowed that to happen for my life. But my wonder years were in the 80s, so you're talking about a time when everything was dope, everything was creative, right? The best hip-hop came from the 80s, the best movies came out in the 80s, the best cartoons with Thundercats and G.I. Joe and Transformers. I was a part of all that. The original NES came out in the 80s. I was a part of all that. I collected comic books. Back in middle school, I used to trade comic books for my lunch money, because I was so that deep. So if my origin story started and ended in the 80s, because I went to Morehouse in 91, and that's when life changed for me, because I got more serious into girls and business at that time, and I kind of left. When Magic Johnson made the announcement, that was basically my fandom years ended right there in 1991. That's a long story to a short question. So,
Thank you.
yes, this gentleman had a question here, and I'll come back then, and then to the ladies. Or you want me to?
As far as what made you feel that you needed to tell such diverse stories?
So, as I mentioned, my days with fandom ended in 1991. I got into business, entrepreneurship. I started in the music industry as a creative, and learned the lifelong lesson that in life it's either ownership or enslaveship, right? And I began to ride the ownership back in the mid-90s in the music industry, in the independent music community. I was a part of that here in Atlanta. And then I transitioned from music to film to publishing books. And now I started Black Lion and Cubs, which represents the highest iteration, if you will, of all of the past work that I've done since the mid-90s. I started Black Lion and Cubs simply because I became a father for the first time 5 years ago. And I was sharing with my children some of the things that I grew up on, the aforementioned cartoons in particular, Dungeons and Dragons, let me not miss that one, and Voltron. Shout out to those two. And so I was sharing this with my kids, and I just realized that, there's no faces that look like them in those cartoons. I love them. right? We didn't have any choices back then. We just got what we got. But as an independent, long-time independent creative, I said, well, shoot, you guys like this? Daddy can do that. So that was the whole genesis of that, the creation of Black Lion and Cubs. Daddy can do that. And I decided that I was going to create something that represented the best of us, that had faces that looked particularly like my own children, and represented our culture, because what else would I do? You know? And so, but that's the reason why I did it. I felt like an anime space is a space that's not, that my children responded well to. I love the artwork of anime, and I said, well, it looks like there's a void in this place, and I have the opportunity to fill it. That's just what I did. We want to get the young lady and then see your side, because I'm a
equal opportunity.
well, not equal. You know, I'm a gentleman. I'm a gentleman.
I appreciate that. I'm
Yes.
Ash Brown for AshSetIt.com, and I wanted to get your take on, how should I phrase this? The inspiration of creating Black Lion and Cubs as a multimedia movement versus just another cartoon that kids see on television. Could you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I've had the great benefit of having an experience in multiple industries. Right? Like I said, I started in music, went from music to film to publishing books, and then just started to realize that if I could write a song, I can write a treatment, right? Or I can write a book, or I can write a proposal, or I can write a cartoon or a script for a video game. And so what I realized is that if you open your mind to the possibilities, they're literally endless. And like Andre 3000 said, I think in 1996 at the Source Awards, he said, the South got something to say. That's how I felt, not about the South, but about myself. You understand? I got something to say. And I believed enough in myself because of my parents that instilled that in me a long time ago, that, that if I have something to say, it's my responsibility to say it, be genuine and authentic, and I have the capabilities to manufacture, produce, publish, because I had learned that in the music industry. So when I started Black Lion and Cubs, like I said, it just represents the highest iteration of all my past experiences. I went into it immediately with the idea that I'm creating not a cartoon, but a brand, and a brand that's encompassing of as many different things as I can decide to put my characters or stories in, and that's why I did it that way. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
As a fellow Morehouse alum,
What class?
99.
All right.
Speak of, your fantasy died at that point. I get that, but what was it like matriculating through an environment where the student body looked like you? Because like you, I was in honors programs in high school where I was, if not only one of the few black faces in the classroom. What was it like matriculating through Morehouse, seeing other faces like yours who grew up liking the same things you did when that was like few and far in between, and then also same brothers having this academic drive to it?
That was everything for me, man. Like, I'm very grateful to my parents. I try as much as I can to be as good a parent as they were, as intentional as they had been with me. I'm the beneficiary of parents that had vision and intention for their children. And because I'm a former educator, I see so many that do not have that. And you can see the results, even as adults, of why their lives are in such disarray. You understand? So, going to Morehouse, so I say that to say that going to an HBCU with my household was not even a question. That was just the expectation. And then, Spike Lee, when I was in middle school, Spike Lee in school days, that was a wrap. You know what I'm saying? When school days came out, I knew where I was going. But being there at Morehouse, as you said, you're there with everybody that was like you in their high schools, from their communities. And you're pulling those people that also had parents that had intention or had a cultural experience some way, shape, or form, whether they had it in their house or it was the hip-hop music, they listened to Chuck D and KRS-One and said, you know, I want knowledge yourself, you see. So going to Morehouse was everything for me, just being surrounded by like-minded people and seeing that, you know, I'm not an alien, you understand? I'm not alone, I'm not just really the exception, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you start to see like, wow, there's more of us, and you know, that's when the Cosby Show and Different World was out, so it was just really, it wasn't just about being at a HBCU at that point in time, it was really a cultural American phenomenon that I was a part of, I was benefiting from that. So I say that it was everything for me but it was necessary for me to have that experience in Long Island, because going to Morehouse, if you're surrounded with people that only look like you, you have a very skewed perspective of the world, right? Because that's all you know. But I told you, I grew up around Jewish kids, white kids, Asian kids, Latino kids. So some of us as black people, we enter the world, if we're not exposed, we enter the world, you know, we might feel things, you know, feel strong, feel good about ourselves, but we don't really know. You know, we still have to deal with the isms and the biases and the questions about, are we able to really compete with other people? You know, because it's true that, you know, in our community, we still have that thing with believing that the white man's ice is colder, right? Mm-hmm. And whatever white people do is, you know, white is right, that type of, you know, thing that we have, the stigma that we have in our community. And I knew for a fact that when I got into the world, you know, the business world, that I knew I could compete because I grew up with them. I was in their households. They're not smarter than me. You understand? I knew that, and I didn't guess it. You know, they're not better than. I knew this because I was in their households. I went to school with them, so it was a good experience to have in Long Island, but then also be at the HBCU. I'm sorry, guys. I talk a lot. So. Yes, ma'am.
So, around the stories that you put together, do you have any particular mythology or previous experience that you draw for inspiration? Like I know some authors, when you say like Yoruba mythology, etc., do you draw from any of that, or what are your journeys?
Again, my intention with Black Lion and Cubs was really just to do something cool for my two girls. It didn't even start, I didn't even really have the intention on creating an anime brand. I just wanted to have a picture drawn of me and my children. And when I saw the picture, I said, wow, I could do something with this. You know, I'm always thinking expansively, like what's the next? And so I saw the picture and I said, wow, I could do something with this. And so that's what led into it. But in short, when I started Black Lion and Cubs 2 years ago, my children were 4 and 2. And I wanted to utilize it as a way to tell stories to help my children develop what we call in the education world a strong social and emotional competency. Confidence is one of the biggest parts of that. Confidence and strong self-esteem. I know for a fact, working with adults, that when that is lacking, it just brings on a myriad of problems in a person's life when they lack confidence and self-esteem, high self-esteem, right? So I wanted to utilize this brand as a way to build that in my children, even at 2 and 4 years old. So the theme for Black Lion and Cubs is true power comes from within, because that's an idea and a concept that I believe is lacking in many aspects of our communities. You know, we're always looking for the answers to come outside, looking for those people to help us, and those people do. No, power comes here. So I wanted my children to understand that early. And because my name is Hotep, my children's names are African as well, it was important that I exemplified some of the best of African cultures in our storyline. And because my name is Egyptian, I went to, you know, that time period. So the characters in my stories are named after ancient Egyptian heroes or mythological characters, or some that were actually there. I didn't want to stick to anything. It's a totally fictional story, but I wanted to weave in elements, symbolism, and such as you see here, that would allow people to catch a glimpse of it, hopefully do some research on their own to look into it. So that's, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Last question?
Yes, sir.
You only been at this like with Black Line 2 years, like since you've been working long and hard with it. What is that writing style like? What goes into your process? Because I mean, writing books isn't easy for anybody. So for you who have done this last couple of years, what goes into your process, and what also keeps you going and doing it?
I'll answer the second question first. Right? Because this is totally motivated and inspired by my children, that's what keeps me going. You know, becoming a parent for me is, I'm glad I waited. I'm 51. I'll be 52 this year. So my first child, I was 46 years old. You know, for a lot of people, that's old, right? I mean, you see my hair, I'm walking around, people wondering if I'm grandpa, you know what I'm saying? But I'm glad I waited. I'm a much better father today than I would have been in my 20s when I was trying to figure out all the other aspects of my life, you know. I've been married 22 years. I have a career. I know who I am. Like, I'm settled. So having children is like still the most difficult thing I've ever done, but it's a lot easier now than I know it would have been then. That being said, so that's my motivation. My children have done two things. They've put an Energizer battery in my back. So, you know, people that know me from my hustle days, you know, they used to call me Hustle Simmons, you know, because I used to get out there and get it. But, you know, now, you know, I'm just OG silverback gorilla. Like, you know, nothing gonna stop me. I got an Energizer battery in my back called Saladin and Osaro, and they've minimize my tolerance for my patience for nonsense. So I'm quick to cut nonsense off, and out of my life I got peace, except means peace. To answer your first question, when it comes to storytelling, for me, I always start with the big picture first, and I have a tendency to fill in the smaller details and pieces as I move forward. For example, when I started the stories for Black Lion and Cubs 2 years ago, I wrote it in a way that it would allow me to go back to them and answer certain questions. So the first stories, for example, Valley of the Kings, the characters, the heroes, the father and his two sons are seeking on a mission to find the missing queen, Isis, right? But then why is she missing? Why does, Pharaoh King Khufu, why is he so attached to her? Why is he kidnapping her? And so those questions aren't answered. What is her relationship to the Cubs? These are the questions that I kind of left mysterious so that I could come back to it later and try and fill in the answers. And so I wanted to write my stories in a way that gave them room to grow. And I'm glad I did, because now 2 years later, I'm answering some of those questions, I'm filling in some of those blanks, and I have a more clear vision of where I want to take it. Because of being in this game 2 years, I said, I want to do it this way now. Oh, I'm going to switch that and tweak that. So in next year, I will be not remixing, but retelling some of those stories I started with 2 years ago in a more refined manner. And just, so that's kind of part of my process today. And this was fun, man. Thank you guys. Yeah. Do I leave my information, or they just...
Yes, so if you wouldn't mind, tell our audience where they can find you online and what your next project is going to be.
Okay, so everything associated with Black Lion and Cubs can be found at the website, blacklionandcubs.com. It can be found on the IG at Black Lion and Cubs, or TikTok at Black Lion and Cubs. So to your question about branding, we gotta keep it consistent, right? So it's consistent and easy to find. Next projects, we are just created a pre-launch page for the launch of our next video game called Danger Chamber. Very excited about Danger Chamber. I have an anime for a character called Mighty Moto. He's Mighty Moto the Nomad. That's coming out later this year. And then at the end of the year, I'll be introducing my most exciting character named Super Awesome, who we have figurines and plushies for. He is going to be the one to take Black Lion and Cubs to that Dragonball Z level, which is my goal. So watch out for Super Awesome. Okay. Thank you guys very much.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then. When they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves the Republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if we put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course. Cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. We will.